"What's an old black man like you doing here?" the cop sneered, stepping from the squad car and scanning Malcolm Reeves like a stain on clean stone. No name check, no questions, just a verdict. He didn't belong outside the Hamilton. They shoved him into the back seat, joked through intake, and laughed when he warned them they'd regret it. To them, he was another elderly black man whose words didn't matter. They didn't know they'd arrested Malcolm Reeves, a retired Supreme Court justice. Hey, Darren Tian. His call wouldn't go to a lawyer. It would go to the Chief Justice of the United States. When the precinct learned who they'd grabbed, it would be too late, because the man they tried to silence had helped write the rules they broke. Comment where you're watching from and subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is one you don't want to miss. The city hummed with wealth's quiet arrogance. Glass towers, polished sidewalks, private doors. The Hamilton sat at its heart. Exclusivity guarded like a secret. Doormen held their posts like sentries. Malcolm waited just outside, calm and early by habit. His granddaughter, Maya, was inside finishing a Georgetown law dinner. He'd declined, letting her move through ambition alone. He promised he'd be right there when she was done. He watched taxis slide past and luxury cars drift to valet. It had been years since he'd enjoyed standing unrecognized, blending into the city without whispers following. Anonymity felt like a private gift, until the patrol car across the street stopped feeling casual. Two officers sat in that idling cruiser, watching him too long. Their laughter faded into something colder. Conclusions made before facts. Malcolm felt their eyes like weather changing. He didn't move. He'd spent decades reading men who confuse authority with righteousness. Officer Tyler Rourke tapped the steering wheel. Smirking. "Look at this guy," he muttered. "They always wander into places they don't belong." Beside him, Ben Carver exhaled through his nose, jaw tight, already treating Malcolm's presence as an offense. "Getting bolder every year," Carver said. "Bet he's waiting to hit someone up." Rourke opened the door. "Let's make sure he doesn't get comfortable." They crossed the street with slow certainty, two men expecting obedience before they'd even spoken. "Sir, we need you to move along," Rourke said, voice thick with unlearned confidence. Malcolm turned calmly. Rourke's smirk was too casual. Carver's hands rode his belt, fingers grazing his baton. They looked at Malcolm like a problem already solved. "I'm waiting for my granddaughter," Malcolm answered. "Steady," Rourke scoffed. "We've had complaints about suspicious activity. You can't loiter outside a place like this." Malcolm held his gaze, unblinking, as if the accusation were as routine as paperwork. "Suspicious activity," Malcolm repeated, because he didn't need the translation. Carver's tone stayed lazy. "Move along. We won't ask twice." Malcolm didn't move. He reached into his coat, slow and precise, pulled out his wallet, and offered it. "You'll want identification." Carver's expression tightened, irritated by calm. Rourke's grin hardened. He slapped the wallet from Malcolm's hand. It hit the pavement. Bills and cards scattered under streetlight. Malcolm didn't flinch. His stillness wasn't fear. It was patience sharpened by decades. Carver stepped forward and crushed the wallet beneath his boot. "Didn't ask for ID," he sneered. Rourke chuckled. "Got a problem following directions, old man?" Malcolm's shoulders stayed square. He let the moment stretch, letting the weight of their choice settle in the air. Then Malcolm spoke softly, like a judge reading the first line of an opinion. You are making a mistake. Carver leaned in. Yeah, and what happens now? Malcolm's eyes didn't waver. You're going to find out. The air shifted, warning them quietly, clearly, ignored. Carver pressed his boot harder, daring Malcolm to protest. 3 seconds, he said. Malcolm remained motionless, composed as a courtroom bench. Their ignorance thickened the tension because they'd already decided who deserved power here, and they refused every fact that contradicted it. This is a public sidewalk, Malcolm said. I'm waiting for my granddaughter. You have no legal grounds to remove me. Rourke stepped close, coffee on his breath. You don't get to tell us what we can do, he hissed, enjoying the imbalance. Carver nudged the scattered cards. Bet it's stolen, he said, casual. The lie sat between them like a weapon. Malcolm breathed out, cold. Rethink what you're about to do, he warned. Voice quiet, but heavy. He wasn't pleading. He was forecasting consequences. Rourke grabbed Malcolm's arm and yanked. You suggesting we need permission? Carver shoved Malcolm's back. Rourke twisted his wrist. Painful, controlled, meant to be deniable. Malcolm didn't resist. You are making a mistake, he repeated, slow and deliberate, like the start of a ruling. They shoved him toward the cruiser. Your mistake was not leaving, Rourke said. Then heels clicked and a sharp voice cut the night. Get your hands off him. Maya Reeves rushed up, phone raised, fury blazing at her grandfather treated like disposable. Ma'am, step back, Carver said. Bored. Maya stopped, shaking. This is a mistake. That man is Justice Malcolm Reeves, retired Supreme Court, she snapped. Do you understand what you're doing? Her voice wasn't pleading. It was prosecution, delivered in public. Rourke hesitated for a breath. Carver's eyes flicked to Malcolm. Then Rourke scoffed, smirk, returning. Sure, Supreme Court Justice. Carver pulled cuffs. Cute story. Maya hit record, framing badges and faces as steel snapped onto Malcolm's wrists. Proof, forming in real time. The camera caught them twisting Malcolm's arms behind him and locking the cuffs. You're making a mistake, Maya said, voice cracking. Rourke shoved Malcolm into the back seat. Funny, he muttered. That's exactly what he said. The door slammed like a verdict. Maya's rage blurred until she saw Malcolm through the glass. He sat upright, hands calm in his lap, not afraid, waiting. That composure chilled her more than the cuffs did him, because it meant he knew what they didn't. Power doesn't panic. It mobilizes. The cruiser pulled away, lights dancing on glass towers. Inside, arrogance filled the air. Carver turned, voice casual and cruel. Rourke watched Malcolm in the mirror, grinning. You people never learn, Carver said. Malcolm didn't react. He'd heard that tone too often. Rourke laughed. Wear a nice coat, stand outside fancy doors, and expect respect? Malcolm met his eyes in the mirror. I don't need respect from men like you. Carver leaned back, letting the ugliness rise. Doesn't matter how you talk, he said. You're still a black man, Malcolm finished. Unblinking, the word hung there, naked. Rourke scoffed. Damn right. Carver's voice turned lower. You think you belong? That's the problem. Malcolm's expression stayed unreadable, as if he were watching two witnesses talk themselves into perjury. Malcolm tilted his head. And what am I, then? Carver smiled. A problem. Rourke drove onto a quieter street, laughing like this was entertainment. Malcolm studied them, calm, collecting their words the way he'd collected testimony for decades. Because threats, become evidence when recorded. You people cry racism, Rourke said. You've got it easy now. 50 years ago, you wouldn't even be outside that place. Malcolm waited, then replied, if the knife is 6 inches deep instead of 12, are you not still cutting? Their laughter faltered. Malcolm leaned forward slightly, cuffs biting. You want gratitude because the wound isn't as deep? Because the hand wears a uniform, not a hood? His tone stayed smooth. You call it progress, but you've only learned to cut quietly. Silence thickened inside the car. Instead of ropes, you use paperwork, Malcolm said. Instead of whips, you use policy. Instead of burning crosses, you burn futures. Rourke's jaw tightened. Carver shifted. Malcolm settled back. No, he said. I will not thank you for this. Clean. Final. Rourke forced a laugh. You talk a lot for someone in cuffs. He flexed his fingers on the wheel. Keep it up and we'll take a detour. Carver smirked. Drop you where nobody asks questions. Malcolm watched them, storing every threat like an exhibit. Then Malcolm's face went eerily calm. Enjoy this while it lasts, he said. Rourke frowned. What's that mean? Malcolm's eyes held faint amusement. Savor these last minutes, he murmured, because you don't yet understand what you've done. The precinct lot appeared ahead. And what have we done? Carver scoffed. Malcolm let silence answer until the car stopped. A hairline hesitation crossed Rourke's face. Malcolm smiled. You'll find out soon enough. Red and blue flashed on wet asphalt. Their confidence suddenly felt like a costume slipping. Inside the precinct, late-night complacency ruled. Paperwork, stale coffee, tired jokes. Malcolm sat cuffed, posture unbroken. Rourke cut the engine. That was fun, he said. Carver chuckled. Nothing like reminding folks who's in charge. They still believed the building belonged to them. Carver twisted toward Malcolm. You did good, kept quiet, smart. Malcolm met his stare. Unreadable. Carver's tone sharpened. You know why we stopped you. Rourke leaned back, smiling. It ain't loitering. It's what it's always been. Malcolm's voice stayed calm. Then say it. Yeetie. Rourke grinned. You don't belong, Carver laughed. Malcolm inhaled. You hate that I wasn't scared, he said. That I didn't jump when you barked. That I stood here breathing without your permission. Rourke scoffed. Race. Malcolm's gaze stayed steady. Isn't it? Carver shrugged. Maybe. Doesn't matter. He nodded toward the doors. You're still in our car. Malcolm's voice softened. Dangerous. You think this is over because you've closed a door? Rourke laughed. I don't think. I know. The precinct swallowed them whole. Carver yanked Malcolm's arm too hard, just because he could. Malcolm climbed out with dignity, chin lifted despite cuffs. Inside, conversation slowed at the sight of the well-dressed older man, then slid away. No one wanted to look long enough to feel responsible. At intake, Sergeant Omar de Leon barely looked up. What have we got? Rourke tossed a file. Loitering, vagrancy, failure to comply. De Leon grunted. ID. Carver dropped Malcolm's wallet. Run it. Feels fake. De Leon glanced once, then shoved it aside, uninterested in truth. De Leon jerked his thumb. Process him. He can sit till morning. Malcolm said, I will make my phone call now. De Leon rolled his eyes. You'll call when I say. Malcolm didn't move. I will make my phone call now, he repeated, voice hardening. De Leon sighed. Fine. Let him call his lawyer. The precinct hummed, chairs squeaking, pens scratching, laughter too loud. Malcolm was treated like a number, a body to shelve. He dialed, then waited, because he knew one call could rearrange everything. The phone rang twice before a crisp voice answered. Harold Kessler. Malcolm let a beat pass. Harold. Silence, then a sharp inhale. Malcolm! Malcolm spoke evenly. Listen carefully. The pause carried decades. Where are you? Kessler asked, suddenly edged, already moving in his mind. 17th Precinct, Malcolm said. The line went still. They arrested you? Kessler's voice sharpened. Outside the Hamilton, Malcolm replied. Officers Rourke and Carver. No ID check. They assumed vagrancy. I warned them. They ignored me. A pen clattered. Jesus, Kessler breathed. No, Harold. Just me, Malcolm added. Kessler inhaled, controlled and lethal. They booked you? Not yet, Malcolm said. They'll leave me overnight. A lesson. Kessler answered flatly. That's not going to happen. Malcolm's mouth curved slightly. He'd counted on that certainty more than comfort. Kessler skipped outrage. I'm calling DOJ and the Attorney General, he said. A retired justice unlawfully detained becomes a national problem. He paused. Stay put. Malcolm answered calmly, I had no intention of leaving. The line clicked dead, and the gears began turning. In the holding cell, Malcolm sat straight, coat folded, hat neatly placed. No forms, no questions. Just a cage meant for men the system forgets. He waited anyway, because power isn't loud. It's patient. Nearby officers laughed, unaware the first domino had fallen. Minutes crawled. Rourke and Carver wrote lazy reports, replaying their win. Yet something gnawed. Malcolm hadn't begged or performed. That calm made the night feel unfinished. Carver drifted back toward the cells. Hungry for a reaction he could twist into proof. He mattered. Carver leaned on the bars. You're real quiet, old man. Power move? Malcolm didn't look up. Rourke arrived with coffee. Carver teased. Thought you loved to talk. Preaching injustice. Now you're polite, like we might let you go. Malcolm finally raised his eyes. Deliberate. You're a fool, Malcolm said. Malcolm leaned back. Only a fool mistakes silence for submission. Carver tapped the bars. You ain't submitting? Malcolm's gaze stayed flat. I don't need to fight a man already drowning. Carver's smile twitched, and he hated that it did. A rough voice cut in. Knock it off! Chief Mason Hart stood nearby, arms crossed. Carver straightened. Just having fun, boss. Hart exhaled. We've got enough problems. Don't add to it. He wasn't defending Malcolm. He was defending quiet. Rourke shrugged. Carver backed away. Hart lingered, glancing at Malcolm like something important but inconvenient. Malcolm held his gaze. Hart turned away. Routine returned until the front doors opened and the AIR changed. Heels clicked on tile. Sharp and certain, bringing authority that didn't belong here. Maya Reeves strode in, fury contained like a blade. Beside her walked Assistant U.S. Attorney Victor Lang, known for breaking liars in federal court. Chatter died. Officers straightened. A desk clerk swallowed hard, clutching paperwork like armor. Lang made the room feel smaller. Maya stopped at the desk. I want to see my grandfather. The clerk stammered until Lang stepped forward. Where is Justice Malcolm Reeves? Not a request, an indictment. The title rewired the room. They knew a Supreme Court justice shouldn't be on booking sheet. Sergeant Omar de Leon pushed in. Irritation first. What's going on? His eyes flicked to Lang. Recognition creeping. Lang assessed him like a witness. You're the commanding officer on duty. De Leon hesitated. Sergeant De Leon, he said. And you are... The silence carried consequences. Lang didn't blink. Assistant U.S. Attorney Victor Lang, De Leon's face drained. Lang continued, precise. DOJ is investigating the unlawful detention of a retired Supreme Court justice still in your custody, De Leon muttered. Jesus, as if the word could rewind time. Lang stepped closer. Where is Justice Reeves? De Leon glanced toward the hallway. Maya snapped. You caged my grandfather and didn't check his ID. Her voice cracked. Officers nearby stopped pretending not to listen. De Leon realized every second of delay was another mark on record. Lang inhaled and issued an order. Sergeant De Leon, you will take me to Justice Reeves now. The room went silent. De Leon turned sharply and walked. Steps stiff. Maya followed, phone ready. Lang followed, steady as a metronome, carrying federal weight down the narrow hallway. The hallway stretched long, concrete swallowing sound. They reached the cell block, and Latter died. Malcolm sat upright, hands in his lap, calm as a man waiting for court. He looked up as they approached. De Leon stopped at the bars and hesitated, breath slow. Maya's eyes found the cuffs, then Malcolm's calm. He gave her the smallest nod. Lang scanned the cell with prosecutorial precision, key time, in place, condition, cataloging it all. De Leon's fingers curled, suddenly aware tonight had witnesses, federal authority, and a camera that didn't blink. De Leon cleared his throat. Justice Reeves. Malcolm didn't stand. Sergeant, he said, you denied my rights, ignored identification, and placed me here as a message. Lang's eyes narrowed. The corridor felt like a courtroom, and De Leon knew he was escorting evidence. Rourke and Carver appeared at the far end, drawn by the hush. Their swagger slowed when they saw Maya and Lang. Rourke's coffee hand lowered. Carver's smirk faltered. They were used to citizens demanding, not federal authority arriving, naming them and taking notes. Lang turned and pinned them with a calm question. Officers Tyler Rourke and Benjamin Carver? Rourke forced. Yeah. Lang nodded. Good. Don't go anywhere. Maya kept recording. Carver swallowed hard, feeling the badge turn from shield to spotlight under federal eyes and unblinking glass. Maya said, You mocked him. You cuffed him because he stood near wealth. Rourke started to argue, then stopped. Carver stared at the floor. Malcolm watched quietly. Lang's gaze sharpened. He'd found the thread to pull until the whole precinct unraveled. De Leon fumbled for keys that felt heavier than metal. He glanced at Lang, begging for an undo button. Lang offered none. Open the cell, he ordered. De Leon's hand shook as he turned the key. The lock clicked. Ordinary, yet it rang like a verdict. The bars swung open. Malcolm rose with slow grace, wrists stiff, dignity intact. De Leon reached for the cuffs, then hesitated. Malcolm held his hands out. Lang watched the steel like a weapon. Remove them, he said. De Leon obeyed. Metal clinking loose. Shame loud. Freedom didn't change Malcolm. It restored the space around him. He lifted hat and coat with precision. Maya stepped closer, fighting tears. Grandpa, Malcolm touched her shoulder. I'm here, he said. Then he looked at the officers. Now, he murmured, we talk law. Lang's voice stayed clipped. This detention is unlawful. The assault on his property, threats in transport, denial of counsel, documented. He nodded toward Maya's phone. This recording is one piece, Rourke tried. We had complaints. Lang's stare flattened him. From whom? Produce them. Now. Chief Mason Hart arrived fast. trying to look in control. "What's going on?" Lang faced him. "Chief Hart, DOJ is opening an investigation into your precinct." Hart blinked. "Investigation?" Lang didn't blink. "Civil rights violations." Hart's eyes flicked to Malcolm and went wide. "Justice Reeves," Hart stammered. Malcolm nodded, polite and lethal. Hart glared at Rourke and Carver. "What did you do?" Rourke swallowed. Carver couldn't answer. Lang cut through it. "Secure all body cam footage, lock down reports, no edits, no deletions. Consequences followed. Any missing recordings will be treated as obstruction," Lang added. Hart raised his hands. "We'll cooperate." Lang's eyes stayed hard. "You will comply." DeLeon started. "This was a misunderstanding." Lang silenced him with a look. Malcolm spoke quietly. "They weren't confused. They were comfortable." Hart's face tightened as comfortable settled like a charge. "What do you want?" Malcolm answered. "Accountability." Lang added, "Immediate release. Preservation orders tonight. Interviews tomorrow." Hart nodded too fast. Rourke blurted, "We didn't know who he was." Malcolm stared. "That is the point." Maya's voice cracked. "You called him a problem." Lang lifted a hand. "We're done in corridors," he said. "Chief Hart, conference room, now." He turned to Rourke and Carver. "Wait. Separated. No communication." Officers moved in. Rourke flushed. Carver's eyes darted, trapped. Phones began ringing like alarms waking the building. Radios crackled. A captain demanded details. City Hall wanted answers. The precinct's cozy rhythm shattered. Malcolm listened, calm, while the institution shook. Maya trembled. Malcolm squeezed her hand once. "You did right," he murmured. Maya swallowed. "I was scared." Malcolm stayed firm. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," he said. "It's refusing to let fear decide." Lang checked his phone. "Attorney General's office is aware." Hart's face tightened. Malcolm added, "This is bigger than tonight. Tonight is proof." Rourke and Carver were guided away, separated. Maya's camera caught Rourke's last look, anger and fear. Carver's shoulders sagged as if the badge weighed 100 pounds. Malcolm stood, centered, storm in a suit, while the building that caged him began closing around itself. DeLeon walked ahead, keys clinking, face gray. Hart tried. "Justice Reeves, please." Malcolm interrupted softly. "Don't apologize to me," he said. "Apologize to the men you leave in these cells because you assume they'll stay quiet." Hart swallowed. Lang gestured. "Let's go," he said. At the doorway, light spilled like interrogation glare. Lang's phone buzzed. "Preservation letters are being drafted," he said. "If anything disappears, it's obstruction." Hart nodded quickly. Malcolm's eyes stayed steady. "Paperwork won't fix this," he murmured. "Change what you think you're allowed to do." Behind them, phones kept ringing, each call another tremor. Officers whispered, "Suddenly, careful." Maya steadied her breathing, recording. Malcolm's hand rested on her shoulder. In his calm there was no triumph, only certainty the next hours would expose far more than two officers' cruelty. Rourke and Carver vanished down a side hall, escorted apart. Hart watched, realizing the mistake was now his crisis. Lang asked Malcolm, "Are you injured?" Malcolm flexed his wrists. "No," he said, "but others are every night." Maya's eyes hardened. Pattern was the point. They turned back toward the cells, and DeLeon slowed, staring at bars like he couldn't believe a door could undo a lifetime. His breath came. Malcolm's gaze didn't waver. He wasn't waiting for mercy. He was waiting for the system to admit its truth. De Leon hovered at the threshold, caught between obedience and denial. The corridor held its breath. Malcolm stood with code in hand, eyes steady on the men who thought him disposable. Somewhere deeper in the building, another phone rang, sharp, insistent, promising consequences were moving. De Leon stayed frozen, and Malcolm waited, not for apology, but admission. Maya's camera rolled. Lang's presence filled the hall like pressure. The open cell behind them looked like a mirror, reflecting what this precinct had done. The night wasn't ending. It was turning. AUSA. Victor Lang's eyes flicked to the man behind the bars, and something in Lang's posture turned from inquiry to inevitability. Justice Malcolm Reeves lifted his gaze, and a faint, almost playful calm crossed his face, because Lang finally understood Malcolm hadn't been caught. Sergeant Omar de Leon exhaled like he was swallowing glass and reached for his keys. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He simply stepped to the lock and turned metal with shaking fingers. Because excuses were useless now, and denial had nowhere left to hide. The door eased open with a soft click and a groan of hinges. Malcolm didn't move at first. He let silence sit in the hallway like a witness. Then, unhurried, he rose with the steady ease of a man who never doubted the ending. Maya Reeves stepped forward, hands trembling, but voice firm. "Grandfather." Malcolm's eyes softened as he turned toward her, his mouth curving into something nearly a smile. "Maya." She blinked fast, trying to keep fury from spilling into tears. Before Maya could unleash everything boiling in her chest, Victor Lang snapped his attention back to De Leon. His voice sharpened into a clean, final blade. "Sergeant, bring the arresting officers here. Now!" De Leon froze, because the unraveling had already started. The precinct felt different, same walls, same lights. But the air had thickened with consequence. De Leon stood rigid, keys clenched, white knuckle. Lang's presence loomed. Malcolm stood free of the cell, untouched. Maya burned with contained rage. A reckoning settled in. De Leon shifted, glancing toward the front desks where whispers replaced jokes. Then a door opened, quiet, heavy, and officers stopped mid-step. A man emerged who had dismissed everything earlier, and now wore terror like sweat. Captain Terrence Sloan had just taken a call. Sloan's face was pale, mouth bloodless, fingers trembling as he tugged at his sleeves to fake composure. "It didn't work." De Leon knew that look, miscalculation made visible. Sloan had finally heard something that couldn't be ignored, something that would not stay contained. Sloan dragged in a breath and spoke with an unnatural calm. "Sergeant, where are the officers who made the arrest?" De Leon hesitated, searching for a lie that might soften impact. None existed. "Tyler Rourke and Ben Carver are still on shift," he said. Sloan's jaw ticked. "Bring them in! Now!" De Leon didn't argue. He turned and moved down the hall with his confidence draining. By the second, fists tightening, as if anger could mask fear. Every step felt like walking deeper into a hole he'd helped dig. De Leon shoved into the break room. Rourke lounged with his feet up, soda in hand. Carver scrolled his phone, smirking like the night still belonged to him. De Leon slammed the door. The sound snapped their smiles mid-breath, like someone killed the music. "Hey, what's up, Sarge?" Rourke asked, trying lightness, failing. De Leon's voice came out cold. "Get up." Carver frowned. "Seriously?" De Leon repeated it, harder. Something crawled under their skin, unfamiliar dread they couldn't name. Because they'd never needed to. De Leon didn't explain. He motioned sharply. They stood slower now, pride fighting panic. Carver muttered, "What's the big deal?" De Leon stayed silent. Silence was worse. They followed him out, steps cautious, as though the hallway ahead might bite. The moment they entered the main corridor, they felt it. No laughter, no swagger, no lazy confidence. Eyes tracked them. At the far end stood Victor Lang and Captain Sloan near the holding area. And outside the cell stood Malcolm Reeves, upright, free, watching. Rourke's pulse kicked hard. Carver's breath caught. Malcolm wasn't seated, wasn't caged, wasn't processed. He was simply there, calm and faintly smiling. Dread poured into them, cold and thick, because for the first time their power felt absent. Lang turned with slow precision, and Sloan exhaled through clenched teeth. De Leon stepped back, distancing himself like a man avoiding shrapnel. Maya's stare burned pure hate. Malcolm met the officer's eyes with patient certainty, the look of someone who already knew the verdict. The room hadn't changed physically, but reality had shifted. Consequence settled into every corner, pressing on badges that used to feel like armor. Lang's gaze locked on Rourke and Carver. No hesitation, no negotiation. The Department of Justice wasn't visiting. It had arrived. "What the hell were you thinking?" Lang's voice didn't ask. It demanded. The force made nearby officers flinch, though it wasn't aimed at them. This wasn't courtroom polish. This was anger, cold, controlled, and absolute. Rourke actually stepped back. Lang advanced. "You saw an older black man outside a restaurant and chose cruelty over procedure." His eyes were dark, sharp. "You didn't verify ID. You didn't treat him with basic dignity. You tossed him into your car like property." The words landed like blows. Lang's tone lowered into something sharper than a weapon. "And you did it wearing a badge." Carver opened his mouth. Lang snapped. "Shut up!" The word cracked like a gavel. Carver's mouth closed instantly. Rourke swallowed, throat working, suddenly, afraid to breathe wrong. Lang's fury shifted towards Sloan. "Captain, did you even review the arrest report before letting them strut around like heroes?" Sloan's lips pinched tight, hands trembling at his sides. He couldn't finish. Every excuse sounded like gasoline near a match. Malcolm spoke softly, calm enough to bruise. "They didn't even run my ID." The sentence hit the hallway like an earthquake beneath tile. Carver flinched. Rourke looked away. Lang's head tilted, stunned, not by malice, but by the sheer stupidity of it. "You didn't run his ID," Lang repeated, voice controlled now, worse than shouting. "You arrested a man and never confirmed who he was." Carver's fists curled at his sides. Rourke's face drained. Their silence became confession, because there was nothing defensible to say. Lang let out a humorless laugh that held no amusement. "Unbelievable!" His eyes burned into them. "You detained a retired Supreme Court justice without the bare minimum due diligence. Do you understand how reckless that is?" They stood frozen, crushed by reality. Sloan cleared his throat, visibly shaking, then forced himself to speak. "You're both suspended," he said. Slow, heavy, like the words hurt coming out. "Effective immediately." Rourke went ghost pale. Carver's jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. "Get your things," Sloan finished, voice rough. "And get out of my precinct." That was the first real consequence. Clean, official, irreversible. Malcolm exhaled softly. A faint satisfaction touched his eyes, because everyone finally learned. The badge doesn't cancel the law. Silence after Sloane's order felt suffocating. Rourke's hands twitched, grasping for ground that wasn't there. Carver tried to square his shoulders, clinging to an illusion of control. But the arrogance was bleeding out fast, and the room could smell fear. "You're suspending us?" Rourke's voice cracked, panic turning sharp. "For doing our jobs?" Sloane didn't answer. He couldn't. Control had left him. Lang stepped forward, calm as a scalpel. "For unlawfully detaining a citizen, for violating rights, for disgrace." Lang's words came clean and brutal. No probable cause, no verification, no decency, no integrity. "And for being too arrogant to recognize the storm you summoned," he added softly. Carver flinched at the quiet. Quiet meant certainty. Quiet meant he was already done. Rourke tried anger as a lifeline. "This is politics." Malcolm shook his head once, almost pitying. "You still don't understand," he murmured. "You thought the badge let you decide who mattered. You thought authority meant immunity." His eyes held steady. "You were wrong." Lang wasn't finished. "You think suspension is the ending?" His tone nearly sounded amused, but his face stayed lethal. "Internal Affairs gets your names tonight. DOJ reviews every complaint, every missing camera record, every misconduct allegation that got buried." Carver stiffened hard. "Your careers are over," Lang said, not theatrical, just factual. "Certifications, pensions, future employment." He stepped closer, watching them shrink. "And the best part? You can't bully your way out of it." Rourke's breath stuttered as panic swallowed his pride. Sloane's voice wavered as he asked the only question left. "What happens next?" Lang turned, expression flat. "An investigation." One word, an entire building flinched. Sloane tried, "We'll cooperate. Full transparency." Lang's reply was ice. "You don't have a choice." Malcolm stepped forward, calm and devastating. "This isn't just them." His eyes held Sloane. "This precinct has been comfortable with rot." Lang nodded. "Top to bottom," he said. "And Captain, if your name is in the pattern, it will surface." Sloane's face went ash gray. Lang adjusted his cuffs, returning to controlled precision. "For now, these two are removed." He motioned toward Rourke and Carver. "Captain, prepare for what's next." Sloane couldn't speak. Malcolm inhaled, sweeping the watching officers with a steady gaze, then turned. "Let's go." Maya stepped close, posture lighter, but eyes still blazing. They didn't ask permission. They didn't wait for an escort. They simply walked toward the doors as officers parted instinctively. Outside, the night air hit like clean water. Behind them, the precinct stood trembling. The next morning, sunlight spilled across a polished conference room in Washington, D.C. Chief Justice Harold Kessler skimmed a thick file. Brown nodded. Malcolm sat composed, hands folded. The last 24 hours hung in Kessler's shoulders. Heavy, unmistakable. Kessler shut the folder with a quiet thud, fingers resting on the seal. "It's moving," he said. Malcolm nodded once. "How fast?" Malcolm asked. Kessler leaned back, clipped and precise. "Federal oversight starts next week." "Unofficially, it started the second you called." "Rourke and Carver are finished," Kessler continued. "Internal Affairs already surfaced multiple officers with discipline histories that should have ended careers years ago." Malcolm's expression stayed calm. "And Captain Sloane?" Kessler's mouth tightened. "He's drafting resignation terms. Politicians want distance fast." Malcolm didn't smile, but something satisfied lived in his eyes. Kessler studied him, then shook his head. This won't stop at one precinct. Malcolm leaned forward slightly. It never was going to, he said. Kessler exhaled, half sigh, half grim respect. DOJ is widening the review, Kessler said, tapping the file. Other precincts, same patterns. Once one domino falls, the rest start wobbling. Malcolm nodded as though he'd expected it. He had. Kessler's voice lowered. You realize what this becomes, Malcolm met his gaze. I do. This turns bigger than a shakeup, Kessler warned. It gets ugly. Malcolm's tone stayed steady. Nothing worth finishing is comfortable. Kessler's mouth curved slightly. Then we finish it. Malcolm nodded once, slow and deliberate, as if sealing a vow neither man would break. Back at the 17th precinct. Days later, the atmosphere felt stripped raw. Federal auditors occupied the main conference room. Internal affairs moved through halls like surgeons. File cabinets opened like wounds. Officers walked quieter, backs less straight, voices careful, because the old comfort was dead. Malcolm walked those same halls not as a prisoner, but as consequence. The air shifted around him. Some looked away, ashamed or afraid. Others watched with tight expressions, hands twitching toward their belts out of habit. But habit didn't equal power anymore. Today, Malcolm carried the weight. Captain Terrence Sloan waited in his office, shoulders squared in a desperate attempt at dignity. Malcolm stepped inside without hesitation. Victor Lang had offered to handle it. Malcolm refused. This conversation belonged to him. Sloan gestured toward a chair, but Malcolm stayed standing, forcing Sloan to sit. You wanted to speak, Malcolm said. Smooth. Sloan rubbed his temple, then cleared his throat. You know why you're here. Malcolm tilted his head. Do I? Sloan's fingers tapped nervously on the desk. I won't pretend mistakes weren't made, he began, voice cracking under control. I ignored things, Sloan admitted, bitterness creeping in. But this department doesn't survive if we throw everyone to the wolves. Malcolm exhaled, disappointment settling like fog. You still don't understand, he said. This isn't about survival of an organization. It's about survival of law. Malcolm leaned forward, palms to the desk edge, eyes unblinking. You let men like Rourke and Carver walk these halls knowing who they were. You allowed the badge to protect abuse. And now you want to talk about keeping the machine alive? He straightened slightly. You should worry about yourself. Sloan's breath stuttered. Malcolm's voice stayed quiet. Certain. You're resigning? Sloan inhaled sharply. I haven't. Malcolm raised one eyebrow. You are. If you don't, they'll remove you publicly, and they won't be gentle. Sloan swallowed, the last thread of authority, snapping. Malcolm stepped toward the door, then paused. Clean out your office, he said, almost thoughtful, while it's still yours to leave. Then he walked out, steady. In the hallway, two men waited in civilian clothes, Rourke and Carver, stripped of uniform, stripped of swagger, stripped of certainty. Rourke stiffened at Malcolm's approach. Carver's jaw clenched, posture coiled, like anger could protect him. Malcolm looked at them without hatred, only clarity. You thought I'd disappear, he murmured. You thought the badge in the system meant you could erase a man. His gaze cut clean. I was never nothing. Carver's breath hitched. Rourke couldn't speak. Malcolm tilted his head. Get used to the other side of the system, he said, gesturing towards the Internal Affairs Office, where investigators waited. You'll sit in those rooms a long time, answering questions you used to ignore. Then he walked past them. Rourke stayed frozen. Carver swallowed, hands shaking despite his clenched fists. That was what powerlessness felt like. No badge to hide behind. No casual cruelty without cost. Downstairs, the building buzzed with paperwork and fear. The old precinct had become a crime scene of its own culture. The days that followed blurred into deposition, press calls, and sealed meetings. What began as one unlawful detention snowballed into something larger, an indictment of a pattern. Malcolm sat inside a DOJ conference room. Polished table, federal prosecutors gathered. Victor Lang flipped through a binder, focused and relentless. "They want you to testify," Lang said, controlled. "Both of you." Malcolm's gaze flicked to Maya seated beside him, tension in her fingers. Malcolm asked, "Who else?" Lang shut the binder. "Sloan, DeLeon's cooperating. And Rourke and Carver? They don't have a choice." Maya folded her arms, voice tight. "They'll still sit there and act like victims." Malcolm's reply came calm. "They deserve a trial." Her jaw clenched. Lang nodded toward Malcolm. "Their defense will claim misunderstanding and protocol. But patterns don't lie. Your testimony anchors the truth." Malcolm nodded slowly. He'd watched men twist benefit of the doubt into a shield for decades. "They'll ask questions," he said. Lang answered, "They will." Malcolm's hands folded neatly. "Then I'll answer." No drama, no fear, just commitment, because truth delivered clean breaks, masks. The courtroom later was packed. Journalists, cameras, analysts whispering into microphones. Rourke and Carver sat stiff in suits, lawyers murmuring at their sides. Gone were their smirks. They looked smaller now, trapped under public light. Malcolm took the witness stand, composed, commanding without volume. Lang rose, buttoned his jacket, and approached. "Justice Reeves, state your name and credentials for the record." Malcolm inclined his head. "Malcolm James Reeves, retired Associate Justice of the Supreme Court." The words settled through the room like a gavel strike. Even the air seemed to pause. Lang kept it steady. "On the night in question, where were you?" Malcolm answered. "Outside the Hamilton, waiting for my granddaughter." Lang asked what happened next. Malcolm described the approach, the accusations, the refusal to verify facts. No embellishment, just a clean timeline that sounded like indictment. "Did they ask for identification?" Lang asked. Malcolm let a beat of silence stretch, then said, "No." Murmurs rippled. "Did they read your rights?" Malcolm's voice didn't change. "No!" The gallery shifted, uncomfortable. Carver's lawyer stared at his notes like paper could invent a miracle. "Did you resist?" Lang asked. Malcolm replied, "No." Lang turned slightly toward the jury and let the simple answers speak. He returned to his table. Then the defense stood, throat clearing, papers shuffling. Predictable question about trespassing, public safety. Simple mistakes. Malcolm didn't flinch. "I was detained because of an assumption," he said. Calm. "An assumption rooted in bias." He let the words settle. They didn't see a citizen waiting for family. They saw a problem they felt entitled to remove. The courtroom went still in a way that felt permanent. Malcolm continued, voice measured. "They treated my dignity like entertainment." He described the threats, the denial of counsel, the laughter, the casual certainty. The defense attorney's face tightened, realizing the truth didn't need theatrics to destroy them. He ended quietly. No further questions. Malcolm stepped down without looking at Rourke and Carver. They no longer mattered as individuals. The pattern did. The verdict began forming long before deliberation, because jurors could feel how ordinary the abuse sounded. Ordinary was the problem. Ordinary was why systems ROT without accountability. When the decision came guilty, the word carried weight like concrete. No applause, no cheers, just breath-leaving bodies. Rourke's shoulders sagged. Carver's stare went hollow. The charges weren't softened into a slap on the wrist. The law finally spoke like it meant something. The judge, Marcus Holloway, a man known for hard lines on civil rights, fixed his gaze on the defendants. "Your conduct was unconstitutional," he said, voice firm. "Not a lapse, a pattern." His words felt like history catching up. The room listened the way rooms listen to fate. "You abused power granted to protect," Judge Holloway continued, "and you did it under color of law." He paused, letting the truth burn. Then he delivered the sentence: federal prison time and heavy penalties that would follow them like chains. Rourke's face drained. Carver's lips trembled once. The gavel fell. Final and clean. Rourke and Carver were led away in cuffs, the same metal they'd used like a toy. Malcolm didn't gloat. He watched with a calm that wasn't mercy, just clarity. This wasn't vengeance. It was consequence, long delayed. Weeks later, the 17th precinct looked gutted. Internal affairs findings were devastating. Nearly a third of personnel resigned, were suspended, or faced investigation. Federal oversight moved in with clipboards and subpoenas. The old jokes were gone. The easy swagger was gone. Only caution remained. Captain Terrence Sloan wasn't spared. His resignation came quiet and fast. He tried calls to old allies who suddenly went silent. He tried bargaining for reputation, for pension, for distance. None of it worked. His name became shorthand for negligence, the kind that ruins trust and careers alike. Sloan struck a deal, admitting willful failure to act in exchange for reduced exposure. He lost severance, took deep pension cuts, and was barred from future law enforcement leadership. The punishment wasn't just financial, it was permanent loss of authority. A man who enabled power was denied power forever. Malcolm returned to the precinct, walking past empty desks and auditors reviewing files. Maya stood beside him, arms crossed, absorbing the transformation. "Hard to believe this is the same place," she said. Malcolm answered quietly, "It is. It's just finally being seen." "Do they understand what happened?" Maya asked, voice low with heat. Malcolm's gaze swept remaining officers, some ashamed, some angry, some frightened. "Some do," he said. "The others will." He didn't sound hopeful. He sounded certain, like a clock that doesn't care who likes time. The next day, courthouse steps were lined with reporters. Cameras flashed. Microphones leaned forward like hungry mouths. Victor Lang stepped to the podium, tie straight, voice controlled. "This is not isolated," he said. "This reflects systemic failure." The morning air felt charged, like a storm building. Questions fired at Lang from every direction, but he didn't blink. "Oversight will expand," he said. "Grand juries are active. Indictments are pending." He paused, letting the words land. "What you saw here is not an ending. It's the beginning of accountability at scale." Malcolm watched from the side, hands clasped behind his back. He'd stood in courtrooms his entire life, wrote decisions that shaped civil rights law, and still, Seeing momentum move like this felt rare, not because law is weak, but because will usually is. Today, Will showed up. As Malcolm walked down the courthouse steps, sunlight stretched long shadows behind him. He didn't stop for cameras. He didn't savor applause. Work remained. The system didn't heal in a single verdict. It changed only when pressure stayed applied, day after day, case after case. Maya kept pace at his side, phone finally lowered. "What now?" she asked. Malcolm's voice stayed calm. "Now we make sure this doesn't shrink into a headline," he said. "We make it policy, training, oversight, consequences." He glanced at her. "And we protect the next person." Victor Lang caught up, expression sharp but satisfied. "You ready for what comes next?" he asked. Malcolm nodded once. "I've been ready," he replied. Maya's shoulders eased slightly. For the first time since the cuffs, her breathing felt less trapped, but the fire in her eyes stayed. Lang looked toward the crowd of reporters, then back to Malcolm. "They'll come at you," he warned. "They'll call you political." Malcolm's answer was soft and unmovable. "Let them," he said. "Truth doesn't become false because powerful men dislike the cost." Lang returned to the microphones for closing lines. Voice clear and steady. "We will pursue misconduct wherever patterns lead," he said. "We will not accept missing records, quiet cover-ups, or bad apples excuses." The crowd murmured. Officials behind him stood rigid, aware this was a promise. Malcolm watched the press swarm like waves. Then he turned away. Because real work happens off camera. He'd waited in a cell for the system to catch up. Now the system was moving. And he intended to keep it moving until silence stopped being mistaken for submission. I hope you enjoyed this story. Share it and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I've picked 2 more episodes I think you'll love. Until then, stay safe, stay sharp, and remember, accountability begins the moment someone refuses to look away. Justice begins with dignity. If you're 65 or older, you've lived long enough to know America can be both inspiring and heartbreaking in the very same decade. Malcolm Reeves was doing something ordinary, waiting outside the Hamilton on a public sidewalk for his granddaughter, Maya, to finish a Georgetown law dinner. The city around him gleamed, glass towers, valet lines, doormen standing like sentries. But the sidewalk was still the sidewalk. Then the patrol car across the street stopped feeling casual. 2 officers watched him too long, their laughter thinning into judgment. Malcolm had spent a lifetime reading power, and he recognized it instantly. They weren't observing. They were deciding. They didn't ask his name. They didn't verify a single fact. They treated his presence like an offense. "Suspicious activity," they said. The words delivered with that familiar confidence people use when they expect obedience before they've earned respect. They slapped his wallet from his hand, scattered his cards on the pavement, then crushed the leather beneath a boot like his identity was disposable. That moment matters, especially for older Americans, because it exposes what so many of you have seen across the years. Injustice doesn't always arrive screaming. Sometimes it arrives grinning, joking, acting like cruelty is normal. In the back seat, they said the quiet part out loud. They reduced him to a category, not a person. And Malcolm didn't panic. That's the first lesson. He didn't perform fear to soothe their egos. He didn't beg for basic humanity. He warned them once, calmly, because he understood a truth that comes with age. Real power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just takes notes. His composure wasn't arrogance, it was discipline. And it reminds us that dignity isn't something an officer grants. Dignity is inherent, even when a system pretends it can take it away with a pair of cuffs and a smirk. Courage needs witnesses and a plan. Older generations know the cost of silence. You've watched neighbors swallow humiliation to keep the peace. You've seen people let it go because fighting back felt too expensive, socially, financially, even physically. In this story, the turning point wasn't Malcolm's resume. It was Maya's decision to act. She ran toward the scene with her phone raised, voice shaking but steady enough to speak truth in public. She didn't try to out-argue arrogance. She created a witness. She captured faces, badges, and the exact moment the cuffs clicked shut. That's not a small thing. That's history being documented before anyone can rewrite it. Then Malcolm made one call that mattered. He didn't dial a friend who would talk to someone. He called Chief Justice Harold Kessler, someone who understands that rights are not a favor and due process is not optional. Kessler didn't waste time on emotional speeches. He moved like a man who knows systems only change when pressure hits the right points. And soon, that pressure walked in wearing federal authority, Assistant U.S. Attorney Victor Lang. The second Lang spoke, the precinct's casual confidence died. You can feel it in a room when power shifts. Jokes stop mid-sentence. Shoulders square up. Voices suddenly get polite. People who were comfortable become careful. For those of you who've lived through decades of promises, this is a lesson worth holding tight. Courage is most effective when it's paired with action. Maya's recording mattered because it turned "he said, they said" into evidence. Kessler's response mattered because it made the situation impossible to bury overnight. Lang's presence mattered because it forced the building to treat the law like the law. Change didn't come from one heroic speech. It came from coordination, witness, documentation, accountability, and follow-through. That's how communities protect one another, not with wishful thinking, but with clear steps taken at the right moment. Accountability must reach the comfortable middle. If you've lived through enough reforms, you can spot a quick fix from a mile away. A suspension, a press conference, a carefully worded apology. Those are headlines, not healing. What makes this story feel different is that consequences didn't stop at 2 officers. The ROT spread wider, and the response had to spread wider too. Federal auditors filled conference rooms. Internal affairs moved through hallways like surgeons. File cabinets opened like wounds. People who benefited from the old quiet suddenly discovered what fear feels like when it's pointed upward instead of down. Pay attention to the excuse that kept surfacing. We didn't know who he was. Malcolm's reply, "That is the point," should ring like a bell. The test of justice is not how the system treats a famous man with a title. The test is how it treats the ordinary person waiting 10 minutes for family, 1 block from wealth, with no connections and no camera pointed their way. If the law only works when the victim is important, then the law is not justice. It's privilege wearing a uniform. Real accountability is measurable. It looks like body cameras that cannot be accidentally turned off. It looks like stop and search data reviewed every month and shared publicly. It looks like discipline that doesn't depend on who has friends in the building. It looks like training, supervision, and consequences that don't fade when the spotlight moves on. And it looks like a culture shift, where officers fear dishonor more than they crave dominance, where the badge becomes a responsibility again, not a shield. The legacy we leave. Many of you have earned the right to be tired, but you've also earned the wisdom to see what's at stake. Malcolm didn't walk out of that cell triumphant. He walked out certain that the next person, unknown and unprotected, deserves the same law. This story isn't just drama. It's a reminder that accountability begins the moment someone refuses to look away. And it continues only if we refuse to let it shrink into just one bad night. In our later years, we don't just watch history. We help decide what kind of country our grandchildren inherit. Before you go, I want to hear from you. In your lifetime, have you ever witnessed a moment where someone was judged, dismissed, or mistreated simply for not belonging? And what did you do? Or what do you wish you had done? Share your story in the comments because your experiences carry wisdom younger people need to hear. If this episode moved you, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and send this to a friend or family member so we can keep building a community that refuses to look away. What's your answer?